The mid-year tests are just around the corner, so from Belgium to South Africa, let's take a look at what the goals and expectations should be for every team. Let's start with France's tour of Argentina. This should be interesting, with him obviously not having Dupont again due to his commitments to the Olympics with the Sevens team this summer, but also by having 19 uncapped players in their 32-man squad, which the mathematicians of you out there might have worked out is more than half the squad. I guess they're going for a bit of a development tour, but I hope for their sake that it doesn't backfire on them against a strong-looking Argentina side. It makes it difficult to know what their goals and expectations for this tour are, but I would still presume that they are wanting to win the series against Los Pumas. But should we expect them to? They're also clearly wanting to put out new caps and develop some new players. They also are probably looking to rest some guys that haven't really stopped playing for 2 years due to the World Cup. But after a poor Six Nations by their standards, is it a risk to bring such an inexperienced team to Argentina? I'm not sure. I don't think we should be expecting a series win from France this year, but they also very easily could win, which is actually down to Argentina. And that's because they have a new coach with no head coaching experience, but is one of their old superstars in Felipe Contapome. It may be his first role as a head coach, but he was already involved in the Argentina system and also had a good stint as the defence coach at Leinster before that. So it's hard to tell what will happen. Will he keep them to the standard of a 4th place World Cup side, or will his inexperience show and will they crumble? Who knows? They have elected to move on from some of their older and more established players like Sanchez, but I still think they have a strong side they can put out. So I think their goal will be to at least win one of these games against France, and I think with France's squad we probably should expect them to as well. Both sides are also playing Uruguay, who they probably should beat, but after giving France a bit of a scare in the World Cup, I'm sure they won't be taken lightly. Now, this should be the showpiece event for the mid-year internationals. The reigning world champions versus the reigning Six Nations champions. First versus second. Unfortunately, no EuroC champs, but I guess we can't all be that good. But all joking aside, this should be a cracker of a series. The only downside is it's only 2 games. But these two sides have really developed a rivalry over the last few years, being in the same group at the Rugby World Cup. I think the URC has really fostered it. And I can tell you that the Safas have been in the Irish ears for ages, and it only got louder after the World Cup. So I think the Irish really want to shut them up. But, you know, I'm sure that's what Leinster were thinking a few weeks ago too. If they need any tips on how to win in South Africa, I'm sure some of the Scots can give them some advice. I think both teams' goal will be to win the series. It being only 2 games does mean a draw is quite likely, which is what I think the expectations for both of these sides should be here. 1 win to Ireland and 1 win to South Africa. I don't know much about these sides if I'm being honest, but I would probably expect Belgium and Hong Kong to have what it takes against Paraguay and Brazil, but would both probably lose to Chile. That's really all I can say on these teams. Now this is an interesting one. Both teams have been pretty lackluster. Obviously we've already seen Wales play, and getting pretty heavily blown away by a not full strength Springbok side is not a good way to start. But the last time that these two teams played was in the World Cup, and Wales won pretty easily. But this Australia team has a new head coach in Joe Schmidt, who in my mind is one of the best coaches around. Known mainly for his time at Leinster and Ireland, I think he is going unappreciated in his job that he did with the All Blacks. I don't think it's a coincidence that their form turned around when he came into camp. I think he played a huge role in taking New Zealand to the final, and the only questions I have is whether he has enough time with these Wallabies to turn them around before the series starts. So I think we're in a similar place as we were with Argentina and France series, where I think both teams' goals will be to win, but we can't really expect to win from either side. But I think it will go like this. Wales will win the first test, but then Australia will get more used to Schmidt's system as it goes and win the next one. If it was a 3-match series, I think they would probably win the whole thing. This isn't meant to be a predictions video, but that's just how my gut is telling me it will go. Georgia have a very tricky summer, playing 2 Tier 1 teams and another that probably should be classed as Tier 1. I think they will really struggle. They will probably go into it with the goal of winning 1 game. We have seen them take scalps in the last few years, most famously beating Wales in 2022, but they didn't really turn up to the World Cup. But having said that, they do have Richard Cockrell as the head coach, who I have a lot of time for. But it's tricky. If you were trying to rank these teams, you'd probably say Australia are the best and Fiji are the worst, but Fiji have beaten both Japan and Australia the last time they played, so I'm not sure that's a fair thing to say. So I think their goal will be to win 1 game and put up a strong performance in the others, but I think the expectation should be to lose all 3 games. New Zealand have a 2-match test series against England, and on first viewing you may think this should be a clean sweep for New Zealand, considering England haven't been on their greatest form over the past few years, but there's definitely signs of improvement since the World Cup. A win over Ireland in the Six Nations exemplified that, but but they still showed that they aren't quite there with lackluster performances against Italy, Wales and Scotland too. We saw them quite comfortably push aside Japan, but the All Blacks are a different beast. However, the All Blacks do have a new head coach with very little international experience, but seeing how Razor's all-conquering Crusaders side has flopped since he left the role kind of suggests how great a coach he is. I think England should realistically be going into this series with the goal to win one game, but I think it's unlikely, whereas the All Blacks goal should be a series win, and I think the expectation should be a series whitewash for the boys in black, and England go home with nothing. But I don't think that would be too bad for England, as long as they put up strong performances and are in every game. New Zealand also play Fiji for one test in San Diego. I think we should expect this to go the way of New Zealand. Even though Fiji are a good side, I still think it's a stretch too far for them. But I think their goal should be to try and stay in the fight as long as they can, score some tries and keep working on the set piece that was working quite well last year. Fiji also play Georgia in these internationals, which, given their great time at the World Cup, beating Australia and running England close, you would think they should win this game comfortably. But Georgia will be inspired by their European counterparts Portugal to win over the Fijians in the World Cup. We should expect them to win this game, which will be their goal, but I wouldn't entirely count Georgia out. Japan 15 playing the Maori All Blacks is interesting and should hopefully be fun. We've already seen one of these games with the Japan 15 losing 36-10, which is disappointing for them. I would think their goal would have been to try and win this wee series, but it's not going to happen now. But we've already seen the full Japan team play their first game against England, and it didn't go too great for them either. It was a strong England team, but you'd hope for better from Japan, who are a tier 1 test side. Even though I like Georgia, I fully expect Japan to beat them. Hopefully they can put up a big fight. We're going to move on to Italy a bit, who are playing Japan, like I said, and also Tonga and Samoa. With how good Italy have looked under Quesada, I think their goal for this tour should be to win all 3 games. Now, I'm not sure it's fair to expect that of them because Japan are a good side. They gave it to England really well at the start of that game, and also don't forget how well Samoa played in the World Cup. But if Italy really want to prove they are a tier 1 nation and that those weren't one-off performances in the Six Nations, they really need to win all 3 of these games, or at least both Samoa and Tonga. So my goal for them is to win all 3 games, but I think we should expect them to beat Samoa and Tonga. Japan might be tough, but very possible too. Portugal are taking on Namibia and the world champions South Africa. Portugal had a good World Cup, put some good performances against Wales, and also beat Fiji to get their first win at a World Cup ever, and also got to the final of the Rugby Europe Championship, but did get quite heavily beaten by Georgia. I think their goal is to give it a good go against South Africa and get a big win over Namibia, but their expectations will be a reasonable win over Namibia and being quite heavily beaten by South Africa. Scotland have an interesting tour, playing 2 North American teams and 2 South American teams, none of which are tier 1. In risk of being disrespectful to the opposition, this is a development tour for Scotland. They've 11 new caps in the squad, and a bunch of experienced players are not going the tour, like Finn Russell and Blair Kinghorn. They might feel a bit annoyed at not getting a tour against one of the big Southern Hemisphere giants, but let's not forget the last time Scotland did one of these tours, they actually lost to the USA back in 2018. So they need to remember to respect their opposition. However, saying that, I think it's fair to say that we should expect Scotland to win all 4 games, which will be their goal too, but beyond that, their goal is to cap new players, specifically in that hooker position. In the last year, we've had both Stuart McInally and Fraser Brown retire from playing, and now news that George Turner is off to Japan, which could leave him unavailable for the Six Nations. We've all of a sudden gone from having 5 strong options at hooker, if you add Dave Cherry and Ewan Ashman, to only having 2. There are obviously also Matthews at Glasgow, but having only 1 cap and not being on the tour, it seems like he might not be in Gregor Townsend's plans for some reason, or maybe he just thinks he knows what he can get out of him and we'll see him in a Scotland top come November. There's also been questions about where the next generation of Scotland internationals are, and this is Scotland's opportunity to show us. Let's just take this moment to talk about Uruguay, who are taking on both Scotland and France. After a somewhat promising World Cup showing where they beat Namibia and ran both Italy and France pretty close, even being 10 points up on Italy at halftime, I think they might fancy their chances against Scotland. Both France and Scotland are taking development sides down to play them, but I think it's probably fair to say that France's development team is probably stronger than a Scotland one. So I think their goal will be to win at least one of these 2 games, probably the Scotland one, but mainly I think they want to show up and make it hard for the 2 tier 1 sides and at least finish close to them if they lose. I don't think we can expect them to win either game, but we should expect a strong competitive performance from the World Cup side. Chile are also playing Scotland and have had a good past few years qualifying for the World Cup and not looking too out of place while being there. They play Belgium and Hong Kong along with Scotland, so I think their goal will be to beat Belgium and Hong Kong and put up a good performance against Scotland, which I think is what we should expect from them too. The USA didn't qualify for the World Cup in 2023, but are hosting the World Cup in 2031, so we need to start seeing some improvement from them if they are going to make anything out of that tournament. I think the USA are improving. The MLR is a great product for the amount of money that's involved in it, and it is growing slowly and steadily to hopefully have something to sell to the American people for after the World Cup. They're also playing Romania, who I think they should beat and repeat the victory they got over them in Bucharest last summer, but Scotland will be a different animal. They did beat them last time, of course, but that was 6 years ago, and I don't think Scotland will be taking them as lightly this time around. So I think their goal will be to win both of these games, given the past results, but we should expect them to lose to Scotland and beat Romania. I think they still might cause Scotland some problems along the way. Canada. What can we say about Canada? Should we talk about them losing to an MLR side, or keeping a head coach that has brought nothing but failure, or how about failing upwards and getting to be part of a newly formatted Pacific Nations Cup? I really don't expect much from Canada in these summer tests. Just like their counterparts to the south, they are playing Romania and Scotland, and I think it will be pretty comfortable for both nations playing them. Their goal will be to beat Romania and try and put some points on Scotland, but I think we should expect a couple of big scores against them. However, Romania are an interesting case. They got to the World Cup, a thing that both USA and Canada didn't do, but were absolutely woeful when they got there. They had multiple 80+ point drubbings. They finished 4th in the Rugby Europe Championship, which isn't great for a team that used to always be 2nd. And they also got beaten quite heavily by Portugal and Georgia. I think their goal will be to win both games, but they're only slightly above Canada in the world rankings, but I would expect them to win that game, but they will probably lose to the USA, but I think it will be close. Spain's game against Samoa and Tonga should be interesting. Spain did actually qualify for the last World Cup, but were disqualified for playing ineligible players. Samoa were really good at the World Cup, running England very close and were probably the better team in that game. Tonga, on the other hand, for some of the talent that they have, flattered to deceive, only beating Romania and suffering pretty healthy losses to the other sides in Pool B. Spain did finish 3rd in the Rugby Europe Championship, having a very tight semi-final against Portugal, only losing by 3 points. So I think their goal for this tour will be to beat Tonga, put up a strong performance against Samoa, but I'm going to say I think we should expect them to lose both games. Tonga and Samoa are also playing Italy in these tests, so I think Tonga's goal will be to beat Spain and play well against Italy, but I think we should expect them to lose to Italy. But I've really not been impressed by this superstar-laden Tonga team, so Spain might fancy their chances, and for Samoa I think their goal should be to win both games, but I think we should expect them to only beat Spain and probably push Italy close. With all the internationals about to happen, wouldn't it be cool if more of them were competitive, in a way similar to the Euros that's happening in Germany right now? I went through a few ideas for how rugby could have its own European championships right here. Hopefully I've talked enough about each team here, and at least to some extent. Thanks for watching.